Okay. Now I'm going to talk about reset time, the Hindu editorial on GST revenue growth, the Hindu. Okay. Okay. The current revenue trajectory presents an opportunity to fix GST's flaws. The current revenue trajectory presents an opportunity to fix GST's flaws. The gross domestic goods and services tax, gross GST revenues grew 11.5% to cross 1.57 lakh crore in May. While this marks the slowest growth in 6 months, with collections 16% lower than April's inflows. A nuanced reading is warranted. April's revenues, which crossed record 1.87 lakh crore rupees, were bumped up by financial year and compliances. Although May's collections for transactions during April, the first month of this financial year, were the lowest in 3 months, the signal a broad positive trend. While GST revenues have been over the 1.4 lakh mark for 15 successive months, May's revenues mark only the sixth time that GST revenues have crossed the 1.5 lakh crore mark. 4 of those occasions have been in 2023. More significantly, even after discounting the April spurt, the average monthly revenues between October 2022 and May 2023 are over 1.53 lakh crore. That is, and 1.57 lakh crore plus if April's record it is included. Revenues have held up despite retail inflation cooling to 4.7% in April and wholesale prices slipping into deflation. Given this backdrop, if price rise continues to ease 10% to 12% growth rates in the GST kitty should be fine if they seem more solemn than last year. Initial data on May's economic activity indicates some acceleration. As per the S&P Global Purchasing Managers Index, manufacturers had their best month since October 2020. Fuel sales rebounded after 2 patchy months, and wholesale auto sales appear to be speeding, albeit on a low base for some segments. Besides other compliance and consumption-led tailwinds could lift revenues in the coming months. Till July, when the GST regime completes 6 years, the Revenue Department is undertaking a special 2-month drive to tackle evasion and fake registrations. A new return scrutiny system has kicked in to prioritize cases with high revenue implications. From August, e-invoicing will be mandatory for firms with an annual turnover of over 5 crore rupees, snipping possible loose ends in the tax trail. That some holders of the withdrawn 2000 currency notes are looking to spend a part of their stash by September 30 may provide some fillip too. If around 1.55 lakh crore rupees likely to be in the new normal for monthly GST revenues, the government must seize this window to expedite the resolution of policy level anomalies that still haunt the tax. Even if political bandwidth is constricted ahead of the Lok Sabha polls, the GST Council must not dither on what is doable in the short run, such as setting up tribunals, clarifying gaming and casino levies, and drawing up the blueprint for fixing an unwieldy rate structure. Unwieldy rate structure. Good and bad on India and artificial intelligence. India needs to harness the benefits of AI while avoiding adverse effects. Generative artificial intelligence is AI that can create new data. There are many instances of generative AI in the world today, most commonly used to generate text, images, and code in response to users' requests, even if they are capable of more. The widespread adoption really established their capabilities, leading to awe than worry. OpenAI's ChatGPT chatbot mimics intelligence very well. Today, it has become synonymous with the abilities of generative AI at large. In the last few years, AI models backed by neural networks trained on very large data sets and with access to sufficient computing power have been used to do good, such as finding new antibiotics and alloys for clever entertainment and cultural activities for many banal tasks. But it has caught attention most notably with its ability to falsify data. The world is past being able to reliably differentiate between data that faithfully reflects reality and data made to look that way by bad faith actors using AI. This and other developments led a prominent group of AI pioneers to draft single sentence and alarmist statement. Mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as the pandemic and nuclear war. Dishonest actors building AI are one of many threats, but the statement is too simple to admit the complexity of human society. Some specific concerns enumerated in other communiques are worth taking seriously. However, the insurrectable of the inner workings of AI models, their use of copyrighted data, regard for human dignity and privacy, and protection from falsifying information. The models being developed and used today are not mandated to tick those boxes, even as there is no way to understand the risk that they pose. So even at point when the computational resources required to run AI models in full coincide with that are available in consumer electronics, the world will need at least a rolling policy that keep the door open for democratic institutions to slam the brakes on dangerous enterprises. At this time, the Indian government should proactively launch and maintain open source AI risk profile, set up sandbox R&D environments to test potentially high-risk AI models, promote the development of explainable AI-defined scenarios of intervention, and keep watchful eye. Interaction is just not an option. Apart from the possibility of adverse consequences, it could render India missing the harnessing AI for good buzz. A critical juncture in Manipur, security personnel stand guard at Kangchok, Manipur, in view of the security situation in the state. In a press statement issued on May 12, 10 Kuki-Jo legislators of the Manipur Assembly, 7 of whom belong to the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, called for a separate administration. They said that the government of Manipur tacitly supported the unabated violence by the majority Meiteis against the Chinkulki Mejo Jomi Hill tribals, which has already partitioned the state and effected total separation from the state of Manipur. Not surprisingly, in response, a new valley-based Meitei committee staged a rally in 1000 on Taubal on May 20, urging for protection of the state's territorial integrity. Of late, media and public debates have centered around the sanctity and inviolability of borders. The demands for separate administration and for the protection of the territorial integrity of Manipur override the differences within and across the sentenced Kuki-Jo and Meitei societies. The road to separate administration will naturally be a bumpy one, and despite the grandstanding of the Biren Singh-led BJP government, the position taken by Mighty Frontal Organization on the inviolability of borders affecting change of many Manipur borders lies. The central question then is, how will this demand for separate administration constitute a critical juncture in affecting or resisting border change? The answer is that this demand enjoys unprecedented popular support among the Kuki-Jo groups. Earlier demands by tribal communities for a separate administration in the form of union territory or a territorial council or the sixth schedule were what the report of the National Commission to review the working of the constitution constituted by the BJP-led National Democratic Alliance government in 2000 called non-serious, as they did not have popular support. Also, given dissension within and across different segments of the Kuki-Jo groups in the past, a sustained mobilization for separate administration remained elusive. Now faced with a common antagonistic other whose position on this demand is not likely to change in the short term, popular support for this addition of the demand for separate administration is likely to be sustained and gain more political traction. Thus, this movement may well constitute a critical juncture in the demand by Kuki-Jo groups for a separate administration. The extensive erasure of lives and land titles, destruction of property, and the unprecedented displacement of the population across the hills and the valley suggests that the Rubicon of living under one political roof has already been crossed. As suspicion and distrust in Manipur run deep, returning to the status quo ante is now widely seen as amounting to a Hobson's choice. Given that the violent and ethnic cleansing unleashed against both sides of the divide since May 3rd has resulted in complete demographic and geographical separation, to borrow from what W.L. Singh, General Secretary of Cookie People's Alliance, told The Wire, the demand for separate administration has become a fake comply. Shifting of constitutional gears. This may require a radical shifting of constitutional gears. Three possible institutional architectures are plausible. The first is to grant a separate administration in the hill areas of Manipur for not only the Kukijos but also the Nagas. The roadblocks to this are the reluctance of some Naga groups to compromise on their expansive territorial project under the rubric of a sovereign Naglim, and the staunch opposition by the state and Maitai groups. The second is to grant separate administration for the Kukijos districts where they are dominant, and resolve the Nagas' demand in due course. Invoking administrative convenience and economic viability, the two cardinal principles of state reorganization in India, as counterpoints against the demand, may not work in this case. This is because the institutional and administrative blueprints for this have already been laid down by the extent of states' constitutional arrangements under the Manipur Hill Area District Councils Act 1971, where the territorial boundaries of district councils broadly overlap with ethnic boundaries. In 2016, 7 new districts were created out of the existing 9 districts in Manipur, which further sharpened this overlap. Given that Faljal and Churchandpur, the two districts where the majority are Kukujo, sit on a rich natural gas belt, Assam Arkan Basin, effective exploration and harnessing of these resources may offset any counter argument about the economic non availability of this demand for a separate administration. The Kukijo dominated districts have two important strategic gateways to Southeast Asia, Bahang and More. This makes the demand for separate administration a compelling economic proposition. The challenges to this blueprint are districts such as Chandel, Kamjong, and Tengnaupal, which are marked by a mixture of populations and have been long-standing territorial dispute between the Kukis and the Nagas. However, this may not be insurmountable if a combination of territorial and non-territorial autonomy is crafted in the future. The third possibility is to maintain the status quo ante, where the territorial integrity and Manipur is secured. Given the increasingly hardened integrationist position taken by the state and frontal Meitei groups, this may entail dissolution of extant sub-state constitutional asymmetrical arrangements under Article 371C, the district councils and tribal land rights. This will, of course, require not only amendment of the constitution but also a revisit to the normative and political foundations of Manipur. The poison of the Kuki-Gujo groups to no longer accept the powerless sub-state constitutional symmetrical arrangements or any political solution within the existing state of Manipur suggests that this impasse is likely to continue. This means that Manipur will remain a deeply divided society. If the experience of other such societies, including Belgium, Canada, the Netherlands, Switzerland, are to be used as any guide, the holding together of federal polity or polities requires genuine recognition and accommodation of territorially mobilized groups, not as a matter of strategic convenience of the majority, but as a matter of enduring value. The reluctance to do this and the lack of democracy and federalism in East European states in the 1990s had led to state breakups, which Manipur may not like to emulate. The jury is out. The debates to protect the territorial integrity of Manipur are likely to lead to spawn a competing constellation of agendas, ideas, and interests without any immediate resolution, or these may line in complex ways to affect or resist change in state's border. This is likely to resuscitate the point that defenders of the rights of state and democracy, such as KTs, raised during the Constituent Assembly debates against Article 3, which B.R. Ambedkar envisaged as a flexible and democratic constitutional provision. So argued that to place power and authority in the center to effect a change of state boundaries without requiring the consent of the said states would amount to the serious prejudice not only of the units but even of the very idea of democracy. In their overweening ambition to protect the rights of states and democracy saw and others forgot what K. Santan, another influential member, cautioned that mandating consent of the states would leverage absolute autocracy of the majority in every province and state. When they vote down a minority's demand for merger with an adjacent state or for information or for formation of a separate state of their own. This debate continues to remain unresolved. The jury is out on whether the constellation of agendas, ideas, and interests of multiple actors across India's multi level federal polity and process align to foster institutions which protect the absolute autocracy of the majority or promote and accommodate the rights of territorially mobilized minority groups within and across the Indian states. The national trade has carbon as a carbon problem. International trade as a carbon problem. Environmental protection should not become a smoke screen for trade protectionism. The European Union EU key climate law, the carbon border adjustment mechanism has spoke India. New Delhi fears that CBIM will cripple the export of its carbon intensive products to the EU. While India's exports may be limited to aluminium, iron, and steel and affect only 1.8% of its total exports to the EU, India has reportedly declared CBAM as being protectionist and discriminatory. There is also talk of challenging the CBAM at the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement body. This debate brings to the forefront the interlinkages between trade and the environment. While that international trade regime allows countries to adopt unilateral measures for safeguarding the environment, environmental protection should not become a smokescreen for trade protectionism. The CBIM needs to be viewed from the standpoint about CRBM. In 2005, the EU adopted an important climate change policy known as the emissions trading system. Now, in its fourth stage, the ETS is a market based mechanism that aims at reducing greenhouse gas emissions by allowing bodies emitting GHG to buy and sell these emissions amongst themselves. However, the EU's concern is that while it has a mechanism for its domestic industries, emissions embedded in products imported from other countries may not be priced in a similar way due to lack of stringent policies or due to less stringent policies in those countries. This, the EU worries, would put its industries at a disadvantage. To tackle this, the impacted industries in the EU had so far been receiving free allowances or permits under the ETS. Furthermore, the EU also apprehends the phenomenon of carbon linkage that is due to the application of ETS. European firms operating in carbon extensive sectors might possibly shift to those countries that have less stringent GHG emission norms. CBAM is aimed at addressing this quagmire and thus leveling the playing field for the EU industries. Under CBAM, imports of central carbon intensive products, namely cement, iron, and steel, electricity, fertilizers, aluminium, hydrogen, will have to bear the same economic cost borne by EU producers under the ETS. The price to be paid will be linked to the weekly average of the emissions priced under the ETS. However, where a carbon price has been explicitly paid for the imported products in their country of origin, reduction can be claimed. WTO consistency. A cornerstone principle of WTO law is non-discrimination. Thus, countries are required to accord equal treatment to like products irrespective of their country of origin, most favored nation treatment, and to treat a foreign made like products as they treat the domestic ones, national treatment principle. While the CBM design is origin neutral in appearance, it may in its application discriminate between goods from different countries on account of an inadequate carbon pricing policy or due to onerous reporting requirements that importers would be subject to. A key consideration in all this may be whether the carbon intensive products to which the CBM applies are like. While steel products may appear similar, the process which electric arc furnaces produces steel is less carbon intensive than the steel produced in blast furnaces. For instance, by being a products um, okay, by being products that are not like the rules of non-discrimination would have little application in such a case. According to the debate of CBAM, it reignites a long-standing debate in international trade regarding the discourse of Muslim education. Muslim students must be enabled to access any educational institution of quality and choice. India is home to 213 million Muslims, the third largest Muslim population in the world. Or 11% Muslims in the world live in India. Live in India, they constitute 14.2% of the country's population. It is national loss that such a sizable section of society suffers from severe marginalization, excessive exclusion, and deep deprivation. In no sphere of social and economic life, including education, are they represented in the ratio of their population. In higher education, for example, Muslims account for just 5.5% of total enrollment as well as faculty. Muslims constitute around 72% of the religious minorities in India, but account for only 22.75% minority educational institutions. In absolute terms, the number of education institutions established, run, managed and maintained by the Muslim community would be substantially large. A system in 2019 by the Minister of Minority Affairs claimed that 13,000 educational institutions were granted minority status. The actual number of schools, colleges, universities established, run, managed and maintained would run into several thousand, even after excluding madrasas and maktabs. The community ought to owe a great deal of guilt philanthropist forefathers who had the foresight to set up those institutions. These institutions, not wanting to rely on the colonial masters, they are thought This is a wonderful article about the feeling the pulse with Dr. AI. What the technology driven future holds for patients and doctors is both exciting and scary to envision. The best way to predict the future is to invent it, and the future so invented is feared by the very person who invented it. The reasons given by Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of artificial intelligence, for leaving the technology giant Google appear similar. They say it is scary to think of what an unbridled AI can do to humanity. Well, I suppose it includes healthcare. Much of the future of healthcare technology will be AI driven, and some of it is already here. AI and machine learning are deployed in several of the medical gadgets and instruments that are in use at present. Internet of Medical Things is doing wonders in its application in remote patient monitoring and wearable devices such as continuous automated blood sugar level monitors and insulin infusion pumps, which deliver timely doses of insulin to diabetic patients and are referred to as artificial pancreas. At the given pace of technology advancement, it is exciting, and if I say Mr. Hinton's sentiment is scary too, to envision what the future holds for patients and doctors alike. I have taken the time machine to the future on a fast forward journey, not very far, according to Mr. Hinton. So, welcome to the futuristic hospital. I am ushered into the outpatient wing by a friendly robot, trained to fold its hand and greet me with an anglicized vanakkam. It wraps a band across my wrist, a smart chip, which captures of all of my personal data, of course, Aadhaar linked, including my DNA print, after fingerprint, and iris scan. Next, I enter an area of modular consultation suites. The suites are expensive and cold, brightly lit wide corridors with polished floors and gleaming desks. There are huge LED screens flashing on the walls and all other paraphernalia onesies in sets of any Hollywood sci-fi movie. Sleek user display terminals adorn every desk. Behind the desks are the doctor robots and robotic nurses with a humanoid appearance. Vocoder sound effects of robotic speech fills the air. There are paramedic robots drawing blood for testing with painless laser guns. Everything seems so surreal around me. A robotic nurse with a plastic smile on her face appears, greets, and checks my vitals on the remote monitor and scans me head to foot on an AR augmented reality programmed system and let me go with a thank you in a deep bass voice. I am shown my way to the waiting hall for the senior expert to see me and diagnose my ailments. The waiting area looks like the interior of an aircraft, only that the plus high back chairs are arranged in a wide circle and I am instructed to wear a seat belt. The chair slowly rotates a full 360 degree as it revolves slowly to enable me to see the happenings around. On one corner of this big space, there is a giant display screen where medical students are taught clinical medicine in virtual reality. The counters at the end, I guess, are pharmacies where again robots dispense medicine ordered on computer generated prescription. The familiar double helix DNA print of the patient appears on the corner of the prescription for the personalized medicine. Pharmaceutics, the tablet dispensed for the pediatric patients are designed like miniatures of cartoon characters. There are Walt Disney, Mickey's, and Donald Duck, and our own Chota Bean. There are metallic parts of skull, bones, and joints. It dawned on me that 3D bioprinting can design drugs, stents, and grafts of desirable quality, shapes, and sizes. In the waiting hall, there are patients of all age and genders, but this time they are real and alive in flesh and blood. As I keep waiting, I engage myself in conversation with an elderly gentleman. He apparently is waiting for a review after undergoing robotic surgery, wherein through a keyhole opening on his chest, a completely clogged blood vessel in his heart was replaced a week ago with an electronic blood vessel. A tiny camera-laden robotic device went into ultra-narrow blood tubes. Endovascular ultrasound took pictures, cleared the clog, and replaced the blood tube. There is an octogenarian who was earlier crippled by Alzheimer's but was implanted with a brain chip which enables him to process the memory for recent and past events effortlessly. It was amazing to note that the hospital offers a cyborg services which can repair, replace, or augment lost functions of the human body. So people who suffered brain attacks and lost power of limbs and cognitive ability can get back to near normalcy with the implants which use a brain computer interface. In extreme instances of augmentation, this can even create mini superhumans out of ordinary men and women, whether pertaining to physical, mental, or sensory functions. Thus, one can acquire the pace and agility of a sprinter like Usain Bolt or the speed and decisive mental powers, prowess of a chess grandmaster. Any other skill sets that one wants to acquire can be ordered, designed, and fitted. At last, I am seen by the human doctor with the natural intelligence but on a virtual screen. He mechanically takes down the history, runs the vitals, and checks me up again by remote monitors. All the data along with an AR computer images are fed into the computer algorithms and on the screen flashes and diagnosis which blinks every now and then like how breaking news appears on TV channels. Again, algorithms come up, but this time for treatment, the doctor says a curt thank you and disappears from the screen. My smartphone beeps and the prescription comes on my mobile screen. I am reminded of the payment towards consultation and diagnostic services. Needless to say, it is a mind-boggling amount, and with one swipe of a card, I pay and walk out. As I come out of the time machine, I am reminded of our neighborhood GP is a befriending smile and warm, reassuring touch and words whenever I visited him in his decryptic clinic. I resolved to be more courteous and thankful to him in future. Life is a marathon. Okay, NJU for the long run is a learning experience and a test of endurance. I started running more than a decade ago to achieve sustained fitness. I enjoyed running more than I thought I would actually and got addicted to it quickly. Surprisingly, in addition to fitness, I got a meditative experience which makes running my stress buster. I did not stop me there. When you work hard in want of something and you do get it, your mind craves for more. The marathon bug bit me too. I once heard a joke about marathons. They say that a marathon race is akin to a show where the audience pays for the show and also performs in the show. It's true in a sense, but there is more to it than meets the eye. I thought marathon is not for everyone, specifically me, until I took the courage to register for my first half marathon a decade ago. I often puffed during most part of the race, but managed to complete it successfully. The runner's high from the race easily outweighed the pain that followed the run. I still cherish the finisher medal from my first half marathon. Soon marathon became a regular in my running calendar, and they added motivation for my running workouts. Have run many of marathons and a couple of full marathons till date. I continue to run races, though I restrict myself to just one or two every year to avoid burnout. Every race, right from the first one, teaches something new, but the ultimate lesson is the right preparation for the race. Practice starts slowly several months ahead of the race, peaks a few weeks before, and then tapers down during the days leading up to the race day. In addition to the weekly run days with the targeted mileage strength and cross training days are part of a plan, runners naturally set or revise their goals during the final phase of the preparation, and the goal is definitely not about winning the race. Leaving aside the small strength of professional athletes or elite runners, most participants run for their own goals, which is mostly setting a new personal best or personal record, PB or PR. Improving the BB by even 5 minutes could be extremely satisfying. Some people run to set a PR which would qualify them to run any of the major marathons around the globe, and many run to just complete the enduring distance and not end up in the DNF did not finish list. In fact, the term race here is a misnomer, as most people run to meet their personal objectives as opposed to race over the other runners or to attain a podium finish. It is astounding to see thousands of people assemble in the early hours on race day. It creates an euphoria of ambience which gets the adrenaline kicking and pumping before the race. Once the race is flagged off and the race timer takes, there is a bit of chaos. When every runner starts to run with the crowd, the chaos withers in some time and everyone settles to their own comfortable pace. From that point on, their only thoughts are the road ahead and their self objectives. Every completed kilometer seems like a milestone. Even when they get to the end, runners brush aside all the pain and sprint to get to the finish line. When they do, they feel an immense burst of endorphins comparable to none. It is a given that every race is a learning experience for the runners, but it also teaches an important lesson for life. Irony is that marathoners, among all people, hardly realize it. Wouldn't life be a lot better if people consider every challenge in life as a marathon? Setting similar self objectives, preparing themselves and working to meet their own goals rather than competing against one another to get to the finish line fast. Marathon is not a rat race. Life needn't be either. The good old postcard. In the good old days, all that you had to do was to pull out a postcard from your personal stock and put pen to paper. The new generation, digital savvy generation, may have no knowledge of the good old postcard, but those who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on may not forget this 4 by 6 yellow card, which once was the most common means of communication between humans. In the good old days, all that you had to do was to pull out a postcard from your personal stock and put pen to paper. Information, emotions flowed too easily with pen in hand and postcard on your study table. The space on one side and off of it on the other was enough to pour out your emotions. Gone are those days. Today. You pick up your mobile phone, pass the desired telephone number, and there you are. You are instantly connected to your correspondent, and you can go on and on. Your talk time is now in your hands. Instant connect, instant response. You can phone your friend ad infinitum. The postcard has taken away with it the anxiety, anticipation of waiting, and the thrill of receiving the card. This is the age of instant pleasures, instant gratification, instant station, instant satiation. Perhaps not so with the good old postcard. The sight of the postman gladdened your heart. The postman was a special person who brought tidings from afar, and after many days he has all but disappeared these days, and the courier man brings only business letters. Nobody felt ashamed of the lowly price of the postcard. The low price did not attach any sense of low self esteem to the postcard nor to the user of the postcard. In its early days, the good old postcard cost only some paise. In today's world, when the value of a thing is decided by its price tag, the lowly postcard could not survive, and therefore it is all the better that it has died a natural death, though the postal department continues to sell it. Life in a nutshell. Everyone's life is an interesting tale, while many start feeling purposeless after a stage. Many times, some of us would have mused over the purpose of our birth and life. We study work, marry, have children and family, earn name and fame if possible, accrue wealth by luck and ability, and then become aged and start waiting. I don't prescribe this analysis to everyone, but to those who think and recall life events and feel happy or sad or proud and then finally relax. They have nothing much to do but to think of the past. But like a play or cinema with all action packed instances, happy moments, and dramatic turns, heart wrenching miseries also come to an end or closure in some form. There can be something like they lived happily or thereafter, or the protagonist is dead, or it just continues. Though everyone's life ends with death, till then there are events which keep happening for good and bad. Do they carry any values, meaning, sense, and lessons? All sometimes, some all times, and none most of the times. Shakespeare said our lives are just like plays which come to an end when the curtains are down. The most famous speech is in As You Like It is the Seven Ages of Man, which says all the world stays and all the men women merely players. Samuel Becket's Waiting for the God It Writes tries to tell the absurdity or purposelessness of life. It was voted the most significant English language play of the 20th century by the British Royal National Theatre. Of the two, the former is more acceptable of most of us because everyone's life is an interesting tale in some way or other, while many start feeling the purposelessness of their lives only after a stage. Both convey something. Some persons are born in this world with a purpose, for others, it is just existence with absurdity, sounds unfair and cruel, yes, it is. Beckett juxtaposes the modern human psyche with hope or pursuit of happiness in one way or another. In other ways, he shows the absurdity of human life. Beckett presents two major characters, Vladimir and Estragon, who go on waiting for Gadot. They represent today's human psyche. Surprisingly, Beckett was not open to most interpretative approaches of his work. Be your best friend. No, a time will come when the only friend of you is you. No difference of opinion, no loud arguments, and no sacrificing for the other. Child to grandfather is long distance, a path loaded with experiences and a process of learning all through. This big learning takes one to a point of decision making, and I made this decision without a second thought. Yes, I am my best friend, and there is no doubt about it. No arguments, no controversies, no enmity. It all happens with me and me alone, and no worries. Almost at the last lap of the cycle called life. I rewind the happenings and code them to evaluate the region for the strong bond between me and me. Family and friends were fun extreme, and fights and misunderstandings had to be taken along the stride. In the process, were meeting people, gaining confidence, and making friends large in numbers. It had just its advantages and disadvantages. A mixed large group where the good and bad were difficult to identify. The bad did their harm, and the good stood helpless. Life had to move on, carrying all along, and it was a difficult balancing act. Marriage was a life different. The relationship has to be built on trust, and it doesn't happen overnight. Trust is not one built over words or wealth. It only happens with doings and happenings which had to be experienced without a thought. It has to proceed gaining strength to strength and a solid foundation built on it. With the age gaining strength, friends and folks around start diminishing at a pace frightening. Call it the funny act of fate, or the one left behind will have to watch the ones you played with, the ones you studied with, and the ones you lived with disappear behind the curtain, leaving you behind to live in pain. Unfortunately, it is at this point of time the transformation occurs. One tends to squeeze into self, setting the doors to the outside world and the people in and around, distancing from the others, and it reaches a point where the only friend for you is you. Recently, on a train travel, I was debating in my mind silently with myself. Having reached a rational judgment, I said to myself, yes. My voice, unfortunately, would have been a bit loud, and the one seated next was staring at me. He kept on staring me with rigid looks, expecting more to happen, and I smiled at him. The smile confused him, and he pushed himself far away. I was amused at his attitude, and when he looked again, my smile was open and broad. That was final, and he shifted to a place not to be seen. I, being my friend, as advantages many. There is no difference of opinion, no loud arguments, and no sacrificing for the other. It is a one man's world with the other built in. There are periods of loneliness, but the long length of pace compensates. Long length of peace compensates. I call it aged wisdom, which landed without planning. 7+ decades of seeing and experiencing this lovely life reaches the conclusion. My best friend is I, me, myself, loving every moment of it. Vibrant village ponds. Till a few decades ago, rural locals had abundance of ponds. We often recollect those idyllically happy and Elysian days of our childhood with great enthusiasm. Today, my thoughts were centered on ponds, which were once an integral part of our village life. Ponds played crucial roles in the life and culture of our villages. Till a few decades ago, our village had a plethora of ponds. In olden days, almost all the households had their own ponds, which catered to everyday needs for drinking water and irrigation. These ponds were perennial and were consistently recharged by rain. The village ponds served the dual function of flood control during the monsoon and irrigation during summer. Ponds were an integral part of temples and sacred groves. While huge pond is a feature of many temples, the sacred groves accommodated a number of them, which vary in numbers and size in accordance with their vastness. Those ponds, which are home to many water plants, fishes, and birds, formed integrated ecosystem. The pond would be fringed by dense thickets of various types of medicinal trees and shrubs, which provide hiding places for birds and animals. The water percolating through the roots of such trees eventually got collected in the ponds, and the devout believers had deep faith in their medicinal properties. Normally, the temple ponds would be protected by a wall or barbed wire fences. Every year before the annual festivities, the temple ponds would be drained and cleaned of mud, allowing fresh recharge of pristine waters. We, the children, thoroughly enjoyed the draining and cleaning of the vast temple pond. The rainwater carried along with it a large number of fishes such as climbing perch and snakehead. With a couple of days after draining, the water would be recharged, naturally reaching its original level, a flight of steps. led to the bathing ghats where people used to wash their hands and feet before entering the temple. All temple ponds I have seen had a ubiquitous greenish color imparted by certain algae. By the late 1960s, the practice of manual draining of temple ponds and had been replaced with pumps driven by motors, which indeed has taken away much of the thrill and charm of the pond cleaning. We had a large pond in the northeastern corner of our homestead till the mid 1970s. This pond remained as the main source of drinking water in our locality. People from the immediate neighborhood would come to collect water. The pond surface was completely carpeted with a thick layer of water cabbage. During rainy season, the water would breach the barrier and overflow to the front and courtyard, bringing with it a lot of fishes. It was a fascinating sight to see the white-breasted water hen walking gleefully over the water surface. Later, with the arrival of pipe drinking water, the ancient pond became a victim of neglect, and a few years ago, it was unceremoniously filled up to build a house. Along with the pond, the water hens too vanished forever, forming part of our collective memory. Fast-paced urbanization has killed the once ubiquitous village ponds and were completely erased from the landscape. Thus, we lost open reservoirs for collecting rainwater, leading to frequent flooding after heavy rain, and during hot summer months, exacerbated the shortage of potable water. Only the temple pond survived the onslaughts because of the sanctity and traditional beliefs attached to them. Claude Manet, the French painter, once remarked, "All of a sudden, I had the revelation of how enchanting my pond was." The Bangalore book crawl. One can spend several hours or even days just browsing the shelves of bookshops in Church Street of Bangalore. The bookshops are so unique in what they offer that one can always enter them with the enthusiasm of explorer. Church Street in Bangalore presents any avid reader with a special opportunity with many bookshops of diverse formats accessible in a small area. Writer and historian Ramachandra Guha recently spoke about these booksellers in a riveting lecture, part of a series about the spirit of Bangalore. It described how he would spend the day doing from one bookshop to another and return home with a bag replete with books. My cousin and I were inspired by this account and decided to emulate his bookshop crowd. Book lovers rarely clock more than 100 feet and have an of their fitness watches, thus the term crowd seems apt. We reached Church Street and at 45 hours gels for a hot Saturday at the legendary Kosi's Mr. Guha wood. We did not find them there. If you were wondering, being sticklers, we followed the prescription from Dr. Guha precisely. First, take a long swig of tradition. Fading glory of libraries. The pleasure of visiting the library has become alien to the younger generation. A few days ago, I visited the library in our town. I was pained to see just a few people inside. Disturbed terribly, I realized that there was a decline in the number of readers in libraries, which are fading out of modern life with people hardly visiting them. Nowadays, people, especially the young, inextricably accustomed, addicted, and enslaved to smartphones, internet, and modern gadgets of various kinds, do not feel the necessity of visiting the libraries in their villages, towns, and cities, nor do they find time to be in libraries. There were golden times when the young and old would find time to visit libraries and invariably spend many hours in the mornings and evenings in libraries reading books of various categories, magazines, and newspapers. In my school, college, and university days, library was an essential part of my life and education. To the people of my generation, the library was not just a building or a place of books, but a temple of learning like our education institutions and sacred shrine of knowledge. So I was habituated into visiting the library in our town whenever I found free time, and I would pick up the books of my choice, magazines and newspapers, both regional and national, and had the pleasure of reading. As a student of college, I took the membership of the library in our town, and with the membership card, I would borrow books of poetry, novels, biographies, speeches, and writings of Swami Vivekananda, read them at home, and attend them to the library before the due date. On Sundays and holidays, after breakfast at home, I would find myself in the library and spend a lot of time there reading magazines and newspapers in the regional language and English. I utilized immensely the libraries in our college and university also to equip myself with sound knowledge in my chosen subjects in my degree and postgraduate courses. I still remember vividly how I strolling along the various rakes of the library, gazing at the books of different categories and subjects, pulling books off the rakes and reading a few pages, would ultimately choose books of my favorite authors like Rabindranath Tagore, R.K. Narayan, Mulk Anand, Ruskin Bond, Vikram Seth, S. Radhakrishnan, and Vivekananda, with my eyes glowing and a radiant smile flashing on my lips. During my search for books in the library, I would often be thrilled to stumble over a poet or a story writer and novelist of great fame known as no unknown and unfamiliar to me, and in the state of excitement, I would borrow the book at home. While diving deep into the book of the new writer, I would be lost in the world of reading pleasure. My visits to libraries and a deal of time I spent there among books, magazines, and newspapers helped me a lot in widening the frontiers of my knowledge and acquiring skills in the English language. It is true that visiting the library and reading books on varied subjects, there was indeed a fruitful and rewarding, pleasant experience, only to know to the ardent regular visitors of my generation, but alien to the younger generation who seek the world of happiness in smartphones and modern gadgets. So it is the right time for young people to put aside their smartphones, think of libraries in their villages, towns, and cities, cultivate the habit of visiting them at least on Sundays and spending a few hours reading good books and magazines and attaining the pleasure of reading apart from improving their knowledge. Where have the leeches gone? Indiscriminate use of pesticides and herbicides is taking heavy toll on biodiversity. Between a leech and a mosquito, the two bloods occurs. Which one will you face with confidence? I am sure that you will choose the latter, remembering how casually we clap and slap them to their doom. A leech cannot be disposed of that instantaneously, that you need the weapon of a common salt. You sprinkle a little and the fellow gets dehydrated to death. When faced with mosquitoes, we also have with us a battery operated gadget, sprays, and repellents to keep them at bay. But despite all that, mosquitoes are not only thriving in the 21st century but are also confidently carrying $1 billion mosquito repellent industry on their puny backs. On the contrary, leeches probably are not doing that way. Knowing that well, I say no because I say so because we do not often see leeches around us these days as we used to in the past. Mosquitoes, however, are ubiquitous. When was your last test with leech? Probably you never really had done, or perhaps it happened a long time ago and you do not remember now. Where have the leeches gone? I remember days from my childhood in rural Assam when one would smear one's legs and hands with kerosene before venturing out into the forests or marshlands to repel the leeches. Even going into the vegetable garden in the backyard was fraught with the risk of being bitten by few. A farmer waist deep in water cutting swamp grass or for cattle risked getting bitten by the big water leech. To free himself of its adamantine grip, the man would rub his warm saliva over the leech, which would then loosen its hold. The very small ones found on land were called Chinese leech in the local dialect, but as to how it got such a name remains a matter of speculation. Cattle were also easy targets for leeches, cows and goats sneezing vigorously to remove leeches from the bleeding nostrils were a common sight in my childhood. But as against such pictures from the past, leeches are hard to come by these days, even in the villages. They have long disappeared from the heavily concretized and polluted urban areas. As a child, I used to think of leeches as one of the most unnecessary creations of God. But now I know that there is nothing which is unnecessary. Every species has its unique position and crucial role on earth. The absence of a particular species in the food chain adversely impacts the delicate equilibrium that is so important for a healthy ecosystem. The excessive and indiscriminate use of pesticides and herbicides is taking a heavy toll on biodiversity. The picture is pathetic. We are obsessively and continuously trying to save the earth according to our needs, requirements, and fancies. Our recklessness has resulted in the disappearance of many plants, animals, species from the planet altogether, or the leeches going that way. It was a holiday morning, and I was casually cycling from Jorhat towards Mariani, a town of in Assam bordering Nagaland. The sky above was marked by heavy nimbus clouds. I could feel the a cool, wet wind against my face. With no raincoat or umbrella, I felt I was heading towards some misadventure. The hills of Nagaland horizon made for a beautiful picture. I got down from my bicycle and was scanning the scene for a perfect shot with my mobile phone camera. Suddenly, my eyes caught a leech on a blade of grass. It was all excited and agitated, sensing blood. I I cringed and placed myself out of its reach, but honestly, I was glad with the sighting after many years. Wishing it better luck, I got on my bicycle and moved on. It was an ordinary experience, but nevertheless carried a message of hope that there are healthy nooks and corners still left in our polluted towns and cities. The spook factor, the urban legends about ghosts that strike an irrational fear. The only thing to fear is fear itself. A popular quote springs to mind in a social gathering where the young and old have settled down for koji that after dinner, at a certain point, the talk revolves around the topic of ghosts and is relaxed in related versions like vampires, banshees, zombies, and whatnot. It sparks a sudden interest in everyone, especially the kids. To my horror, a boy even suggests a way to summon a demon by pronouncing certain phrase thrice while looking into the mirror. I wonder about the impact of such spine-chilling myths on other youngsters who are absorbing every detail with rapt attention. My mind harks back on my school days when a new girl joined our class midterm. She was from Simla and she had a bunch of creepy tales to share with us about her encounters with strange apparitions back on her hometown. It was fascinating to listen to her, albeit with a pounding heart. It seems okay. I'm going to stop it now because it's much.